following program contains mature subject matter. Viewer discretion is advised. Today on an all-new Dr. Phil, a hospital worker convicted of sexual assault. But he claims he was the one attacked.
You said a female patient grabbed your pants.
Yes, and pulled me towards her. I pushed myself away from her.
I walked in the room and saw Jameson committing a sexual act with his patient.
Could this have happened the way he said?
Absolutely not.
You said the curtain was pulled to separate the two beds.
The curtain wasn't pulled.
But in court you said it was. The charge nurse concurs that you were acting very nervous.
Yes, I was nervous. I was caught off guard. I was grabbed.
He was rattled because he was caught in a sex act.
Let's do it.
Have a good show, everybody. Here we go.
This is a safe place to talk about hard things.
Stand by. We'll count you down.
I try to be an emotional compass and point you in the right direction.
5, 4.
I am not giving up on you. Thank you very much. Well, you may be wondering what this hospital bed is doing here. Well, it's a key element in the story we're delving into today involving Jameson Adsit. In 2008, Jameson was working as a safety companion entrusted with the security and well-being of patients in a hospital in Syracuse, New York. Now, according to him, everything was going well until 6 months into the job when Jameson says a co-worker accused him of something unthinkable and untrue: sexually assaulting a female patient. Days later, Jameson was arrested and charged with committing a criminal sex act in the second degree. He adamantly denies doing anything wrong with his patient and swears that he was the one who was attacked. Jameson describes his female patient as a 45-year-old, disheveled, unbathed, homeless woman who grabbed him by the shirt and pants and intentionally made contact with his genitals.
The 45-year-old female victim was sexually assaulted here at Krause last week. 23-year-old Jameson Adsit has been charged after police say he was caught in the act by a co-worker.
This all started the night of October 2nd, 2008. That night I was assigned to watch over a patient that had the tendency to wander. At the end of my shift that night, I was asked to watch over another patient named Beth, who was wheeled into the room that I was already in. A little later on, before the end of my shift, she went to the bathroom. I escorted her there and escorted her back and helped her into bed. This bed is similar to the one that was in the hospital at the time. My friend is going to stand in for the patient. I sat her down, I bent over and scoop up her feet and help her get into bed. At the time, she was laying on her side facing me. I then leaned over to look for the quick release for the guardrail. I took my eyes off her for no more than 10 seconds. And like a rattlesnake striking out, she grabbed a hold of my pants and my shirt and pulled me towards her. I felt myself falling forward. At this point, I braced myself against the bed with my right hand and my left knee, and then used my left hand to push her hands away to get away from her. As I stood up and as I turned around, I saw the eyewitness exiting the room. And this woman grabbed a hold of me, so I didn't feel like I had anything to hide because nothing had happened.
Well, Jameson and his mother Heidi are here today to try and prove his innocence. He and his mother maintain that it was the female patient who was the aggressor that night.
Immediately after this happened, I went to the charge nurse and told her that I had been attacked.
My son told me that a woman had attacked him. When he went to report it to the nurses, they actually laughed at him and said, "Everybody gets groped in this business. File an incident report."
The next thing I know is the police are looking for me, and I voluntarily went down to the police department.
The detective asked my son if he would be willing to sign away his Miranda rights, and my son did. He believed that that woman was being charged, not him.
While I was in the interrogation room, I was hit with a barrage of questions, and I found out that the co-worker who walked in made the allegation that he saw me engaged in a sexual encounter with this patient. I'm being painted as a sick individual who is taking advantage of somebody who is in their worst state and helpless.
My son Jameson did not sexually assault this woman. It's completely implausible that my son would commit such a heinous crime.
When I heard this, it was just like dumbfounding. I had no clue that they were building a case against me at all.
Now, Heidi is joining us here on stage. Jameson is joining us via satellite from Syracuse, New York. So, Jameson, this patient had been admitted the night before this alleged incident took place, correct? This wasn't the night of her admission, is that right?
Yeah, Dr. Phil, that's correct.
And how did you come to be involved with her the second night?
And actually, what happened was I wasn't even supposed to be there. I was assigned to another patient earlier in the day, and I was dismissed from that. And I went up to go say hi to the nurse on that floor, and she asked me to stay and work for her. Beth Nolan didn't come into play until about the last hour of my shift, and she was moved in from the adjoining room to the room that I was already in.
So you were watching her at the request of the nurse, Peggy?
Yes.
And you made a demo for us. Let's roll this tape and take a look at what Jameson put together to kind of reenact what he says happened that night.
This bed is similar to the one that was in the hospital at the time. My friend is going to stand in for the patient. I sat her down. I bent over and scoop up her feet and help her get into bed. At the time, she was laying on her side facing me. I then leaned over to look for the quick release for the guardrail. I took my eyes off her for no more than 10 seconds. And like a rattlesnake striking out, she grabbed a hold of my pants and my shirt and pulled me towards her. I felt myself falling forward. At this point, I braced myself against the bed with my right hand and my left knee, and then used my left hand to push her hands away to get away from her. As I stood up, turned around, I saw the eyewitness exiting the room.
Okay, I've kind of put together what has been reported at different times, and according to the nurse, she says that you said a female patient grabbed your genitals, and we're using that word as a summary term, genitals, and pulled him to her bed. A detective that got involved said that you said a female patient put both hands down his pants, pulled him to the bed. To avoid injury, had one leg up on the bed. She grabbed his genitals and did something inappropriate. No injuries due to grabbing, and said that you said you were physically excited because you were seeing your girlfriend after work. And then to our producers, you said a female patient grabbed the lower part of your scrub shirt and the lower part of your scrub pants and clipped your genitals when grabbed. You braced yourself on the bed with your left knee, right foot on the floor, never exposed self to your patient whatsoever, private parts never made contact whatsoever. The nurse has that version, the detective has that version, and then we have the version you told us, which is what you're telling us again today. Did you tell that to the police officer?
No, I did not tell that to that police officer. I literally went in there to explain what happened, and somehow this was completely turned around against me.
So you didn't tell him you were aroused because you were thinking about your girlfriend?
No, I told him that I was going to see my girlfriend after I left, but that was it.
You didn't tell him that there was actual contact made and an actual sexual act took place?
No, I didn't tell him that.
They did Mirandize you when you went in, correct? They read you your Miranda rights?
The detective said to me, he's like, I cannot discuss anything with you until you read this and sign this.
But police don't Mirandize witnesses. They don't Mirandize victims. They Mirandized suspects.
I was not aware that I was a suspect. He slid me a piece of paper and said, just initial here, initial here, initial here, and sign here so we can, get to the bottom of this and get this straightened out.
Okay, let's take a quick break. Next, we're going to meet the co-worker who was there that night. He says there is no doubt in his mind about what he saw happening. He says Jameson was receiving pleasure from the patient, not fighting her off. We'll be right back.
When I walked into the room, the waistband of his scrubs were pulled down, and she was right there at his genital area. When he realized I was in the room, Jameson was terrified. He turned pale white, like he saw a ghost.
And later,
when I walk in the room, Jameson has his left knee on the bed. The patient is more crouched. The door is right here.
You're where? You're over
I'm coming
here?
right down. I'm coming right here, right down this line.
Tomorrow, who's more controlling, her husband?
You said, I have imposed my will on her.
You've controlled my daughter. You're nothing but a liar.
Or her dad?
The former manager sued for sexual harassment.
I've been a wonderful father.
Alan is creepy.
I wrote you a letter explaining all of my problems with you.
10 pages.
It wasn't 10 pages.
Really? You want to argue with me about page count?
Then on Friday,
My mom is a party mom.
With the cops chasing her, she slammed into a wall. You're saying I'm not sure why they have the opinion of me being a party girl? Maybe it's because you're a party girl.
Friday.
The 45-year-old female victim was sexually assaulted here at Krause last week. 23-year-old Jameson Adsit has been charged after police say he was caught in the act by a co-worker.
My son Jameson did not sexually assault this woman. It's completely implausible that my son would commit such a heinous crime.
I bent over and scoop up her feet and help her get into bed. I then leaned over to look for the quick release for the guardrail. I took my eyes off her for no more than 10 seconds. And like a rattlesnake striking out, she grabbed a hold of my pants and my shirt and pulled me towards her. I found out that the co-worker who walked in made the allegation that he saw me engaged in a sexual encounter with this patient. The co-worker is completely wrong. Nothing happened.
Jameson and his mother Heidi are here, and they are trying to clear his name. They are insistent that Jameson did not sexually attack his patient. Now, one of Jameson's co-workers walked in that night and says he saw the whole thing. He says at first he thought he walked in on a couple having sex, but then he realized it was something far more disturbing than that.
I'm 100% certain that I saw Jameson committing a sexual act with his patient. Before the night of the incident, I had never heard nor met Jameson before. I had just gotten my assignment for the night, and I was headed to the room to switch out with Jameson. When I walked into the room, the first thing I saw was Jameson's back to me. The patient was sitting up on a bed with her legs straight out in front of her in an L shape facing Jameson. The waistband of his scrubs were pulled down.
My pants never came down, period.
His left knee was up on the bed, and she was right there at his genital area. He was committing a sexual act with the patient.
I was never exposed to this woman whatsoever. My private parts never made contact with her whatsoever. My pelvis was below the bed when she grabbed me.
I was very shocked. When he realized I was in the room, Jameson was terrified. He turned pale white, like he saw a ghost. I could hear the waistband of his scrub snap back into place. I turned around, realizing that I just walked in on a man and a woman in a sexual act. Before I could get to the door, Jameson stopped me and said that I should be careful. This woman will start grabbing at my crotch area and calling me her boyfriend and things of that nature. By the way Jameson was behaving, it was clear to me that he had been caught doing something that he wasn't supposed to be doing.
All right, Fred, I appreciate your being here.
Thank you for having me.
You walked in that night. You were coming in to start your shift.
Correct. I was coming in to start my shift.
All right, and so you were Jameson's relief.
Yes, I was.
And you did not know him before?
No.
You two had never met?
Never met.
You worked at the same place, but you just had never crossed paths.
Never
you didn't know him
paths.
to even say hello in the hallway or anything?
Nothing.
When you came up to that room, was the door open or closed?
The door was closed.
Okay. And when you walk in, what's the first thing you see?
The back of Jameson facing me, and the patient was sitting up. She wasn't laying down. She was sitting up with her legs straight in front of her, and she was like in an L position, but crouched.
Okay. So you can see that from the door?
From the door. As soon as you walk in, the whole room is...
How can you see what's going on if he's got his back to you?
Because he had his left knee on the bed, he wasn't completely square to me. He was kind of at an angle.
At an angle?
A cheated little angle, sort of.
Okay.
And so I could basically see a side profile of him along with his back.
How much did you see?
Walked in the door. I took maybe 2-3 steps before I realized what I was seeing, and I spun around quick thinking that I'd walked in on a couple just, being frisky in the hospital.
Yeah.
But at the same time I spun around, I realized, this guy has scrubs on, and he's probably the person I'm relieving. And in that instant, he jumped up, and before I could take the 2 steps to get back out the door, he had approached me and stopped me at the door.
Okay.
And he said basically that this woman you're going to come in and watch tonight, be careful because she'll be grabbing at you and she'll call you her boyfriend, and you just got to be careful. So I said, fine. Knowing immediately I was going to go out and tell someone, what I saw. But I told him that I would be right back because I'm about 10 minutes early. I was going to go get something to drink. This is what I told him, that I'd get something to drink. I'll come back and relieve him. And I just went out and I told the first nurse that I saw.
But did you actually see the sex act taking place? Did you actually see skin-to-skin contact?
No, I did not actually see skin-to-skin contact.
Could this have happened the way he said?
Absolutely not. I know what I saw, Dr. Phil. I walked in the room, and Jameson had his left knee on the bed. She was sitting up but crouched towards his mid-area, and he was at the front of his waistband was pulled down. He didn't have his pants pulled down, but the front of his waistband was pulled down just enough so that whatever, what was taking place could take place.
How did he act? How was he?
He was scared to death when he realized somebody was in the room with him. And he approached me, and he looked like he had seen a ghost.
Could he have been rattled because he had just been attacked or groped by a patient?
No. He was rattled because he was caught in a sex act.
We have a bed over here. Can you demonstrate for me and show me what you saw?
Jameson has his left knee on the bed.
My mom says I have a mental disorder.
You've been self-medicating with alcohol because your dream got ripped from you. You were accused of planting drugs in this woman's car, did you?
No.
But they did find your DNA on the pills. You say he tried to gouge your eye out.
Gouge your eye? I don't try and hurt you. I just try and stop you from doing anything to me.
She's charging you like a bull, is that what you're saying? And you're having to take her down?
Yes.
Plus, your children have been removed from the home.
I'm in Hollywood right now, so how can I worry about my children?
Families in crisis.
I've been worried about your children.
Why don't you take them then, you old witch?
I feel like I care about your kids more than you do.
Off before I hit you on stage.
Can I move my seat, Dr. Phil?
Yeah, actually sit her next to my hypocritical mother.
From homemaker
My mom is a party mom.
to divorced with 2 DUIs.
100 miles an hour with the cops chasing her. Slammed into a wall.
It's enough to drive anybody crazy.
You're saying I'm not sure why they have the opinion of me being a party girl? Maybe it's because you're a party girl. We have a bed over here with a mannequin. Can you demonstrate for me and show me what you saw? Let's step over here, and if you will,
When I walk
step
into
up
the
here.
room,
So, go ahead.
I'm coming from back here. When I walk in the room, Jameson has his left knee on the bed. The patient is more crouched now. The door is right here.
You're where? You're over here?
I'm coming right down. I'm coming right here, right down this line. And then that's where he ran and got me before I could go out into the hallway.
Okay. Is this the height of the bed? I'm not measuring you to the inch, but it was just,
approximately.
this is pretty much the angle. This is why you couldn't actually see
Correct.
the genitalia, but in think about this as a movie. In the freeze frame of a movie, could you have walked in just as this patient does this, just at that second as you walked in? Could that have happened just as you walked in, or was it longer than that?
It was, I don't believe that's what happened. I believe that they were already in that position, and when I walked in, that's when it stopped.
Okay, all right, let's have a seat. So the door was closed, but the second you opened the door, you could see it.
Yes.
And here's a diagram of the hospital room. So you would come in the door here. This is where you were standing, right?
If that's those beds should be further down towards the TV.
Okay.
When you walk in the room, everything's right in your face.
So the beds would extend further down?
Yes.
Okay. And it was this bed?
The first bed was empty. They were in the second bed.
Okay. So it was this bed, and you walk in a few steps?
Yes.
So you're maybe here?
Correct.
And this curtain was retracted?
Correct. It was pulled back.
Okay. You've had to talk about this a number of times, and you have had statements attributed to you in terms of what you've said. To the nurse, you said, when he arrived at 2250, the patient's door was closed. He entered and found agency companion with one knee on the bed.
I said that her face was right up against his mid area, and his waistband was pulled down. I never said that I saw.
This is what was written.
Okay.
Okay. And then to the detective, the door was mostly closed, saw the curtain was pulled.
That's incorrect.
Went around the curtain. The lady in the bed was propped up on her arms and pillows. White guy standing partway up on the bed, facing away. Her face was up at the front of his pants. I turned away and went out. I know what I saw going on, even though I didn't actually see his genitals. You say the door was mostly closed. You told me just now the door was closed. You had to do the latch.
The door was closed.
You told me the curtain was pulled back. You said here that you had to go around the curtain.
That's incorrect. The whole room was in view. As soon as you open that door, you see everything. The curtain was retracted.
So the detective has it wrong.
The detective has it wrong.
Okay. And then in court, the door was closed, which is what you told me. You said the curtain was pulled to separate the two beds. But you just told me it wasn't pulled. Jameson said, female patient pulling on him all night and grabbing his groin area, said, I'm glad you got my back. Never saw his genitals. Then to our producer, you said the waistband area down, sitting with her legs out in front, L shape, heard the waistband snap, which is what you've said here. In court, you said the curtain was pulled to separate the two beds. But you just told me right here that, in fact, you just said it again. It was completely open. You could see the whole room completely. But this is verbatim from the court reporter in court. You said the curtain was pulled to separate the two beds.
The curtain wasn't pulled.
But in court, you said it was.
I didn't have to go around. I never fully got into the room, Dr. Phil. I took no more than 3 steps.
Well, I'm just curious.
For me to do that, I would have to take about 8 steps to go around that curtain, which means I'm right there. When I turn that corner,
that's not my point. My point is why you're telling 2 different stories.
I have no idea how the curtain was pulled. It was back to the wall.
I'm not debating whether it was or wasn't. I'm just debating why you said under oath that it was pulled, and you're telling me now that it wasn't.
I don't know how that's like that.
Jamison, where was the curtain?
The curtain was pulled about halfway down between the beds.
That's enough for me to see in if that was the case, but that's not the case.
Were you visible from the door?
No, there's no way, because for one, the curtain was pulled halfway down the bed, and on top of that, there was another patient in the first bed.
That bed was empty.
That bed was not empty. That was the original patient that I was asked to watch.
So I believe the records show that you were watching 2 patients, and I believe the charge nurse has indicated that you were watching 2 patients and that you said it was okay because the first patient was not being active at the time, so you were comfortable watching the second patient.
That's correct.
Was Jamison assaulted, as he says, or was Jamison doing the assaulting, as Fred says? Well, we're going to take a much closer look at each of their versions of events when we come back, and we're going to hear what Heidi has to say about all of this. We'll be right back.
4 weeks before my son's trial, the woman who attacked my son died of a drug overdose. The woman told the nursing staff that nothing happened.
There was no DNA evidence. Nothing was found on her clothes. Nothing was found on the bed sheets. No case, no evidence.
The gentleman who was the eyewitness was supposed to show up to trial and never did. They had to actually issue a warrant to pick him up so that he would testify at my son's trial. And when he was there, his statement changed from his to the nurses. Then at the trial, it changed again. That definitely should have cast doubt on his testimony.
Well, Jamison and his mother, Heidi, say he is innocent of assaulting his female patient. Well, Jamison went to trial. He was found guilty of criminal sex act in the 2nd degree and spent 5 years in prison.
After I was arrested, everything that could have went wrong did go wrong. My mother hired a very reputable law firm. She saw on 60 Minutes, and then we ran out of money. I had to settle for a public defender that wound up turning out to be a nightmare. He did not go through any of my evidence. He never even told me how he was going to approach my defense. First day at trial, my attorney told them that this is nothing more than consensual sex. He proceeded to say the only reason that I was there was because I was not aware or understanding of her mental status. Right there in the courtroom, I wrote down on a yellow pad to him, "What the blank are you doing?" He said, "I know what I'm doing."
4 weeks before my son's trial, the woman who attacked my son died of a drug overdose. On top of that, the woman told the nursing staff that nothing happened. That was never presented to the jury.
There was no DNA evidence in this case whatsoever, except for an old, degraded bodily fluid spore.
1 drop of bodily fluid would have millions of cells. The crime lab collected only 1.
Nothing was found on her clothes, nothing was found on the bed sheets, there was nothing found on her body.
There were 5 other males that took care of this woman prior to my son. The DNA sample that was collected was never checked against any other males except my son.
When they ran the DNA test on it, it didn't even match me. It was completely ridiculous. No case, no evidence, and I still wound up going to jail for something I didn't do.
Okay, you feel like he went to jail in large part because of this eyewitness testimony.
Absolutely.
And you feel like he's not a credible witness for a number of reasons. One, that his story changed.
Correct.
And
3 times.
And you think he's not a credible witness because of his history and background.
Our attorney explained to us that he had a history as an ex-felon. And our question was then, how did he start working at the hospital if he had to pass a federal background check if he's an ex-felon? Mm-hmm. And the jury was never told that either, that he had a past.
And how old are you?
I'm 42.
You're 42. And this conviction they're talking about, you were how old?
19, 20, going on 20.
It was a long time ago.
Yes.
I do have a question, though. Having been trained in forensic psychology and working a lot in the court system, I understand that eyewitness reports are probably the least reliable piece of evidence that you can find. Not because they have a bad intent, it's just they're just not very reliable. let's see what we agree about. You agree his left leg was up on the bed?
I agree, correct.
Jameson, your left knee was up on the bed, right?
Correct, yes.
Okay. And these beds are against the wall.
Yes.
And so her head would be up towards the head of the bed.
Correct.
And if his, and this is not to scale, but if his left knee is up on the bed here, that means the angle of his body would be this way, correct?
Correct.
And you showed me, you used this as a reference, that you were at this angle right here, where you could kind of see this angle here.
Correct.
All right, that angle in this diagram would have to put you here in this eye line
Dr. Phil.
to be able to see the patient's head here if his crotch was here.
Can I come draw on that thing?
Please. If you're there where you said, how can you see around here to see what's going on? How many fingers am I holding?
Dr. Phil, I know what I saw.
Tomorrow, who's more controlling, her husband?
You said, I have imposed my will on her.
You've controlled my daughter. You're nothing but a liar.
Or her dad?
The former manager sued for sexual harassment.
I've been a wonderful father.
Alan is creepy.
I wrote you a letter explaining all of my problems with you.
10 pages.
It wasn't 10 pages.
Really? You want to argue with me about page count?
Then on Friday,
My mom is a party mom.
With the cops chasing her, she slammed into a wall. You're saying I'm not sure why they have the opinion of me being a party girl? Maybe it's because you're a party girl.
Friday.
Can I come draw on that thing?
Please. You probably draw better than I can.
The straight line that I'm talking about, Dr. Phil, would be this line. And there is no curtain. The curtain's retracted. I see the whole room coming in.
If that's true, that line would be about here?
More or less.
If that's the case, and he's at an angle this direction, as you said, no, go back over there. Don't you follow me. If you're there where you said, how can you see around here to see what's going on?
Because I could see that his waistband was down, and I could see that she was crouched where his waistband was down.
From there?
Absolutely. She was sitting up.
Yeah. Yeah. How many fingers am I holding at my waistband?
Your fingers aren't as big as her head. Dr. Phil, I know what I saw.
All right, have a seat. The geometry doesn't work.
You got it.
I'm just saying the geometry doesn't work. Listen, I'm not saying you're lying.
I understand. You're trying to get to the bottom of it. His reaction to my being in that room further let me know that I saw what I saw.
Well, let's talk about that. You felt like he was acting really nervous and shady. He acted guilty.
Very guilty.
Jameson, what do you say about that?
What he's saying is completely wrong, and what I said to him when I caught up to him, I said, I need you to stay here and watch her. She grabbed me, I need to go file a report. After I filed the report and I was told I could go home, I said, listen, I told you what happened, I'm just covering your back so this doesn't happen to you, and I left.
Well, the testimony from the charge nurse, the night before the incident, the female patient was sitting in a chair, not the bed. She was restless, up and walking around, not physically helpless. She said she did not tell Jameson to sit with the female patient. She says it's common for patients to attack the staff. She said Jameson is the first person to tell her that he had been groped. The incident report was filed by Jameson, and that Jameson's demeanor was very nervous. So there's two things there that are significant. she concurs that you were acting very nervous, and she disagrees that she asked you to watch this patient.
Yes, I was nervous. I was caught off guard. I was grabbed. I didn't know what was going to happen in that moment. I had an adrenaline rush going.
Did she ask you to watch this patient?
She absolutely asked me to watch this patient. There was no choice because she was moved from the adjoining room into my room.
Okay, we have to take a break. Next, one spermatozoon was found on the female patient's face. We're going to find out why Jameson and his mother say this proves his innocence, not his guilt, and what lab tests reveal, and what an expert witness has to say about that same DNA sample. We'll talk about that when we come back.
Do you need Dr. Phil's help? Text Phil to 88500 and share your story for a chance to appear on the show. Standard message and data rates may apply.
Fred saw a helpless person being abused. He could have kept what he saw that night to himself. Instead, he chose to speak out immediately. During the grand jury, the medical examiner was very, very clear that the fluid taken from the victim had a direct relationship to Jameson. They had a match. It confirmed that my son was telling the truth. Without a doubt, Jameson was guilty.
Well, I'm here with Heidi and her son, Jameson. He was found guilty of committing a criminal sex act in the second degree, served 5 years in prison, and is now a registered sex offender and on probation. He's joining us from Syracuse, New York, via satellite. Jameson's co-worker, Fred, and his mother, Rita, are here as well. They say they believe Jameson is 100% guilty. What do you want to say?
I was there when the medical examiner gave testimony, and it was very clear, the way the testimony was laid out, that what they found on her face was a direct relationship to Jameson.
And you interpret that DNA evidence differently.
Yes,
and
totally.
How do you interpret that?
The fact that it was collected 2 hours after the alleged attack, and the cell itself was rotted beyond the ability to extract DNA from it. It had to be sent down to North Carolina for some special test called YSTR. And that particular test, once again, was only ran against my son. It was never checked against anybody else. And if it had come from my son and collected 2 hours after the attack, how was it rotted?
Okay, well, here are the lab results. It says, quote, a spermatozoon was identified on a dried secretion swab from her face. Not detected on an oral swab, negative on the wrist protectors, fitted bed sheets, soaker pad, pillowcases, nightgown, and flat bed sheet. No apparent physiological stains of evidentiary value were observed on the blanket. The Y chromosome DNA profile obtained from the sample from the victim's face is consistent with the Y chromosome DNA profile obtained from the reference sample from Jameson Adsit. Therefore, Jameson Adsit cannot be excluded as the major source of the male DNA in this sample. So the DNA sample does not clear your son. In fact, the DNA sample says he cannot be excluded as a major source. That doesn't mean there might not be others in the population that could also have contributed to it. But others in the population weren't around her. He was.
How could any part of his DNA, or whatever we want to call it, be on her person if his pants were never down?
The spermatozoon. This was other DNA. Could have been drool, spit, skin.
The DNA that was, the YSTR testing was not done on the spermatozoa that was found. There was only one single sperm cell found. And the DNA that they tried to extract from it, they couldn't because it was so degraded that it couldn't even be pulled out.
Next, Jamison has a litany of complaints about his trial was handled. Was justice served, or was this a miscarriage of justice? Why were 2 of Jamison's appeals denied? We'll talk about all that when we come back. We can't do this show without you, our studio audience.
If you are going to be in the Los Angeles area and you would like free tickets, go to drphil.com and click on Be in the Audience.
Because we have a lot of fun here, don't we?
Or you can call 323-461-PHIL. That's 323-461-7445.
This has been appealed twice, correct? The proof at trial was legally insufficient to support the defendant's conviction for criminal act in the 2nd degree. I don't know what happened in that room that day, but I do know this. In America, depriving someone of their liberty is a very high standard, and it should be a very high standard. That's why we say that you have to prove allegations beyond a reasonable doubt. I don't know what happened in that room, but I know that this case has not been proven to that level. And it seems to me that the equitable thing to do here would not be to vacate this verdict, but certainly to remand this back to the court system, and I would certainly hope that the federal system would look at this and say a proper meting of justice would be to give this a second look and a second hearing, and I hope that takes place. I want to thank all my guests for being here today, and I'd love to hear what you think about all this. We'll see you next time. Fred, thanks for coming here today.
Memories can kill ya, but I didn't hear ya. I thought that I could fly, but woke up on the asphalt. I swear there was the last time. I've always been naive. Call it.